Hello, and welcome to the Gravel Ride podcast, where we go deep on the sport of gravel cycling through in-depth interviews with product designers, event organizers, and athletes who are pioneering the sport. I'm your host, Craig Dalton, a lifelong cyclist who discovered gravel cycling back in 2016 and made all the mistakes you don't need to make. I approach each episode as a beginner to unlock all the knowledge you need to become a great gravel cyclist. This week on the show, I welcome back Neil Shirley of Enve to the show. I wanted to get Neil on to talk about the new Enve MOG gravel bike released this year in 2023. You may remember Neil's name from a couple episodes of the Gravel Ride podcast. We first talked about his experience as an OG gravel rider in some of the earliest Crusher and the Tusher events, and later his transition to the team at Enve and their custom road bike project. I was curious, frankly, as to why it took a while for Enve to come out with a gravel bike. I know Neil is such a passionate advocate of gravel cycling that I was surprised they hadn't come out with it earlier. But it all made sense after this conversation, what the journey was for the Enve brand and becoming not only a carbon parts manufacturer, most known for their wheels and handlebars, but now a complete bike brand. After the custom road, they introduced the Melee road bike and finally this Enve MOG. In many ways, waiting to this moment in time to release a gravel bike was a brilliant move. I feel like many of the design elements and attributes of the modern gravel bike have been defined over the last couple years. So the team at Enve was able to come up with everything you would need in a gravel bike, from tire clearance to accessory ports and all the modern geometry we're looking for. This in many ways is a future-proof bike at this moment. I think, again, it hits all the high notes you might be looking for. So super excited to sit down with Neil, catch up with him, talk all things Enve and the Enve MOG, and what's up next for the Enve team. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and with that, let's dive right in. Neil, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Craig. It's good to be back.
I've been waiting a while to invite you back because you didn't have a gravel bike at Enve, and now you do. So the wait is over. So welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, good things come to those who wait, as they say. So here we are.
Exactly. As I mentioned to you offline, like I was preparing to heap you a bunch of crap for not having a gravel bike until this moment. And then I took a step back and I thought about my understanding of the Enve brand and how deep you are in all the other sectors of the sport. And I see from your marketing materials, like you're sponsoring pro tour teams in the Tour de France and the Giro. You guys are all over the world. And then I'm remembering back to my mountain bike days where having an Enve wheel set was exactly what every rider wanted. So I need to step back and say I should have been more patient, Neil. You guys have a lot on your plate, but I'm glad the Enve MOG is in the world at this point.
Yeah, well, I will say, I felt your pain. Having the MOG for me was kind of a long time coming, and something I was anxious for quite a while. And so, but the iterative process, and it's something we've been working on for quite a while. And that process to get to where we were and or where we are today with this bike, like it took a while to really work on some refining it and getting the exact product we wanted to come to market.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know you guys are very thoughtful about the product development process. And just to set the stage a little bit, I'm going to refer people earlier in my intro to some other episodes we did together where we talked about the custom road bike and earlier when you first got there at Enve. But just to set the stage, can you just talk about where Enve is located and what's the core competency of the company?
Yeah, so we're in Ogden, Utah. We've been here. This is our 16th year in business, and we started initially with producing. We were the first ones to do full carbon mountain bike wheels, and really just grew the premium carbon wheel business for road and then gravel, triathlon, you name it. And then 2.5 years, 2 years, just over 2 years ago, we introduced the custom road. So our first Enve road bike, and that bike is made completely here in Ogden as well.
And am I correct in recalling that prior to that, you had been working on supplying some tubes or some technology to some other frame builders along the way to kind of earn some of your chops in the frame world?
Yeah, from the very early years, we were rolling carbon tubes and selling them to Calfee, quite a few of the custom builders. Then we also worked on projects. We did, I don't know if you recall the Cervelo P5X triathlon bike.
Yeah.
We we did the fork and front end design for Cervelo. We did a carbon rear end for Santa Cruz on one of their mountain bikes. So kind of the frame world. We're not necessarily, even though we hadn't produced a bike with the Enve name on it until 2 years ago, like we were not new in kind of the frame business.
Yeah. And then on the buildup of the products that Envy produces, starting from the wheel set, then you then obviously built a name for yourself in carbon forks,
Yep.
later stems, handlebars, seat posts, kind of everything around the cockpit.
Yeah, exactly. The component world, and I mean, we learned so much with wheels, especially when it came to the roadside with just aerodynamics, how to make the fastest wheels in the world, and support world tour race teams. And so we took a lot of those learnings, and that's what we really started applying to our frames. How uh, aerodynamically, how a frame and the wheels can work together.
And if you could talk a little bit about carbon and carbon layups, I think one of the things I found interesting in going to your facility there was the multitude of ways in which you can kind of produce the base material and then think about how it goes into any one of these products from a wheel to a
Yeah,
component.
there's always in the industry there's a lot of marketing spin on a particular type of material or the modulus of that material. And the reality is, pretty much everyone in the bike industry has access to the same materials. A certain bike brand doesn't have access to anything that we don't have, and vice versa. So it's really not. It's not about the material itself that differentiates product. It's what you put into the mold, and basically the recipe, and how that layup is designed. And that's really where it's where the engineering team comes in. And we have 12 a dozen engineers here, full time at Envy. And that's really what most of them are looking at is what the laminate is. And that's where you know because we're making those rims right here in Ogden, we can really manipulate and change the ride quality through the development process. And again, it's a very iterative process where we can change the layup just slightly. Go, do a 45-degree angle for some of the material, and basically bake that rim and be riding it a couple days later, and take that feedback and make another iteration if necessary. So that happens a lot in the process, and I think that's really one of the things that has allowed us to get to where we are, in the premium wheel category.
So in 2021, as you mentioned, you guys introduced the custom road setup, and that provided people the opportunity to order a custom bicycle for you. Kind of interesting. I'm curious to get the perspective is why go custom right away versus a standard product line?
Uh, I think it's because we could. It's because within the building we had everything we needed to be able to do that. We felt that there was a hole in the market in having there's a lot of amazing custom builders out there, and there are a lot of really high tech integrated aero carbon frames out there, but there wasn't really anyone combining those two. So we came up with a process where we could do custom geometry with kind of a modern carbon road frame with aero shaping integration. So we felt that the custom road, kind of filled that void that was out there in the market. And really the process of how we build that bike, it makes no difference if, basically all the tubes are cut to length. So there really is nothing stock, where each frame is so uniquely made that to be able to offer custom geometry didn't make it any more challenging for us.
Yeah, in some ways, it's a brilliant marketing strategy just to kind of set the riders just look at those bikes out on the roads with their custom paint jobs,
Yeah,
the custom geometry with a great deal of lust, and then to later introduce the
yeah,
Melee, which was a standard frame sized road bike.
correct.
I think that was
Yep.
2022. It just sort of made it more accessible for riders who might have been lusting after the custom road for a
Yeah,
while.
exactly. We really took the learnings from the custom road, applied that to the Melee, and when you look at the two side by side, I mean, you can obviously see how much design cues they share. But the Melee, the stock geometry bike, is really, with the custom road. We, on a good week, we produce four of those.
Yeah.
Just the custom nature, the paint job, everything takes a long time. So that doesn't the custom road doesn't really allow us to scale and be the bike brand that we envision being, and we our goal of being. And it was really the stock geometry bikes that allows us to do that. They're not made here in house. They're made by one of our overseas vendors, but we're the ones that controlled that process from design to layup through all the way throughout.
Yeah, so even with that partnership, you guys are able to take your engineering, your desires as to how the layups are put into the mold, et cetera, and
Exactly.
have them executed by a trusted partner.
Exactly. Yeah. And now the Melee, and now the MOG. It allows us to have a bike in our retail partners across, not just across the country but across the globe. So you can go in to your local Enve dealer and have a bike on the ready to ride right off the floor.
And with the Melee, was it introduced as a complete bike or was it sold as a chassis?
It was a chassis only, and actually just this week we're now introducing complete builds. Obviously, for the end consumer that's dealing with their local retailer, that for the most part
Yeah.
they're working with their dealer to buy a complete bike. We're now offering a few different build options for the dealers, so it just allows us to be a little more competitive with our pricing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
gotcha. So for just a little clarity for the uninitiated, a chassis would include the frame, fork, stem, bar, seat post.
correct.
Am I getting them
Yep,
all right?
yep.
Yeah, yeah. And then, as you mentioned, like chances are your local shop is going to be filling in the details and getting you your dream bike. But as you mentioned, you've now added on the ability for dealers to purchase a completely built up bike to put on the showroom floor rather than them taking that step of getting the components,
Exactly.
etc.
Yeah. So
All
yeah,
right.
we're just kind of starting to slowly chip away, growing into a real bike brand.
So the MOG has been on your mind for a
Yeah.
while, but it took till 2023 for that to come
Yep.
out. Why wait? Why sequence it in this way? And what were some of the advantages of waiting?
I think with gravel, or I know with gravel, it's progressing and changing so quickly. Not just how people are riding the bikes, but I think what the expectations are in the bike that you get, and its capabilities, its versatility. Um, so we really did our homework on the MOG, and we had a few. There were a couple of us in the building that had like some very firm things that we want, features of the bike, and so we kind of laid those out and took it over to the engineering team and said, okay, you guys are the smart ones. You figure out how to do this, but these are the key elements we want on the bike, and they were able to achieve that. I get tire clearance. Tire clearance for 50 millimeters. It was a big one. We don't, the trend is bigger, bigger, bigger. I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. I think you will get to a point where you might as well be on a mountain bike. But I felt like being able to run a 50 millimeter tire right now is pretty sweet. Most of the time, you don't ever
Yeah,
need that, but it's nice to know that you can. So,
absolutely. And I'm actually curious to get a little bit of your opinion on this because I know your experience in gravel goes way back and riding Franken bikes at Crusher and the Tusher and just riding what you got. And I know you're a very capable rider and you probably have ridden your custom road on gravel roads at this
sure.
point without much issue. Kind of where do you stand personally on that? Like as someone who like made do, let's call it
Yeah.
like it was.
Yeah.
We made do with the tire clearance we had. Now that you have that massive clearance, where do you find yourself most excited to ride from a tire width perspective?
I'm typically, between a 42 and a 44 for most of the riding I'm doing. Here in northern Utah, and you've ridden the Grodio course, our gravel event that we put on here, and so how rocky and kind of gnarly even just like the forestry roads are. A mountain
Yeah.
bike is probably better suited to it. So for some of that stuff, 44 is really nice. You know, I could, I have ridden with a 50, but I feel like kind of that sweet spot of performance and capability is kind of in that 42 to 44 range.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And I think you said you guys have like a lunch road ride over at Envy, and I'm sure it gets quite
Oh yeah.
spirited. And you've got a background riding on the road. So I was just curious to get your perspective on that, whether, when you have the 50s on there, it feels as spunky as you want it to feel.
Yeah. I think for Grodio this year, I think I plan to run 48 because when you're in a group and they're fast guys that you want to try and keep up with through technical sections, you take bigger risks. And with gravel bikes for so many years, we've been underbiked most of the time when we're descending or you're on technical terrain. And I think the MOG and kind of like these latest generations of some of the other gravel bikes out there all of a sudden are kind of bridging that, where you really can ride up to your level, within reason, of course. If it gets too rocky, obviously you don't have suspension and all that, but um, just with the volume of tires that we can run now, it's incredible what you can do with tire pressure. And I feel so confident now on big tires.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I've got a set of 50s that I've just been too lazy to put on the bike, but the current bikes, the current 44s are well worn past their date, and I just need to find the time and remount these tires so I can experience what a 50 feels like. But I agree. Like I think that's the interesting thing about this moment in time with gravel bike and gravel bike design. Now that you are achieving a high performing frame design around a 700 by 50, I don't think you need to talk about 650B
Yeah.
anymore. It's just not part of the conversation. As I was mentioning to you earlier, my first set of gravel bikes, like I needed two sets of wheels because I just couldn't have the range that I was looking for. But I don't envision for me even bike packing that I would ever want more than a 50
Yeah,
on
and,
there.
and that's kind of what we settled on. I mean, one of those key things we really wanted, we did. There were a couple of us that spent a lot of time between our 700C, 700 by 40, 700 by 42, and 650, and we liked it when we were riding 650. But then as we stepped back to really think, what did we like about it? It was the tire size, it was the volume, not necessarily the wheel size. And so
Yeah.
we're like, okay, we really want to be, ultimately 700 is what we want to be. It's just that current frame designs limited that size. So if we could do 700 by 50, you get the best of both worlds.
Was there some sort of magic design bullet that people arrived on? Was it dual drop stays? What was the unlock that made it possible that we weren't thinking about 4 years ago?
Um, yeah, it's a really good question because you see, if you look at some of the most popular, gravel bikes on the market right now that do achieve decent amount of clearance, you see everything, from the drop stay, to the elevated stay. Uh, we really wanted to keep a traditional looking, chainstay design.
Yeah.
And that's where our engineers had to get creative, and they were able to maintain standard looking right chainstay, but what they to get the tire clearance and chainring clearance, they made the right chainstay incredibly narrow, so narrow that
Okay.
you normally wouldn't be able to achieve it, but they made it solid carbon. So it's a solid carbon stay
Gotcha. Yeah.
from the bottom bracket shell to the next, 6 centimeters or so. And then
Yeah.
that allowed us to get the stiffness and the strength needed, for it to be that narrow. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. That's exactly what I arrived at with a custom tie frame I had
yeah,
built. I just needed to have like a little solid piece of titanium to give me that little bit extra room that I needed to make it all come
yeah.
together.
So then, routing the rear derailleur cable gets tricky. So with the design they came up with was popping it out just behind the bottom bracket, and our chainstay cover actually covers it until it goes back into the frame. So it's really really clean. You have no idea until you listen to the podcast, or you pull off your chainstay protector and realize, oh, the cable's external there for a
It's
section.
right there.
But yeah, I mean, those are kind of some of the fun things that the engineers are able to achieve when you're just like, hey, this is what we want, go to work, make it happen.
I love it. I love it. Um, let's talk about some of those other neat features that they were able to build into this bike because I think there's a
Yeah,
few ones that are out of the ordinary or maybe becoming ordinary, but they're not on everybody's bike. Certainly, if you've had it in your garage a few years.
yeah. The storage, internal storage was something. It's not, we didn't invent it. There are a number of brands that have done it, executed it very well before we did. But I will say it took our hatch design. So basically, the water bottle cage is on a door on the down tube. So you have a hatch door that can just pulls off, and then you have access to the entire down tube. Um, that whole door design took one of our engineers about 6 months to to design, because it was one of those things
Yeah.
like if we really wanted this feature in the frame, but it's really easy to make it a nightmare. Or 6 months down the
Yeah.
road, it's rattling or it's not strong enough. So that was something we put a lot of attention into, and they did a phenomenal job on it. So with the entire down tube as storage, I fit personally on my bike. I fit my flat tire, all the repair stuff, kind of in the lower portion of the down tube, and then the upper portion. I usually have a thin windbreaker, or you could jam some bars or whatever you wanted up there. So it's not
Yeah.
like you have room for a full bike packing setup in the down tube, but for the essentials, like I don't if I'm going and doing a normal 4 or 5 or 6 hour gravel ride, like I have everything. I don't even have a seat pack. So the bike looks clean. It's nothing bouncing around. It's
Yeah.
just all contained.
I love it. And I'm going to acknowledge I'm jealous. Super, super cool. And, I think one of the other things about that design is like, obviously, you need to think about as a frame designer, you no longer have a complete tube at that point. So, what does that do structurally to the design, and how do you make compensations in the amount of carbon you have in that area?
Yeah. I don't think that I really don't think it needed to be reinforced in any way. One of the reasons we decided to kind of keep it open for the whole down tube rather than adding any barriers. It was really about weight, but strength wise, structurally, there wasn't additional reinforcement that needed to be added there.
And are there cables going through there that needed to be protected, or so your jacket isn't messing with them or what have you?
Yes, and we kind of have a really nice cable hose containment system so that they don't mess with anything that you're sliding in and out. So just kind of it's really all about those details because yeah, if you had wires and your rear brake hose flopping around in there rattling and getting caught on other stuff, it'd be a mess. But yeah, all those details have
Yeah,
been minded.
nice. So let's get to some details on the bike. How many stock sizes are available?
So we do 49, 52, 54, 56, and 58 for the gravel bike. So five sizes.
Okay. And are there any details that change proportionally as you go from a 49 to the largest
Yeah,
size?
so kind of with our background as a fork manufacturer, we really believe that the fork rake is important. So and different fork rakes for different sizes. And so with the melee, we provide. I think we have four different fork rakes for the different sizes of the melee, and for the MOG, we have three different fork rakes, so that when you get to the smallest sizes, middle, and largest sizes, that they truly handle how they were designed, and we're not just getting cheap and we're doing one mold for the fork and it has to accommodate the whole size range.
Right.
So we're
Right.
not we're not kind of optimizing geometry around a 56 and then everything on either end of that is compromised. So that's something
Right.
we're proud of. We really think that I think most consumers probably don't realize really what that does, but for us, we're confident, and when we're selling this vast size range of bikes, that really the handling is we're delivering the handling it was
Yeah.
designed for.
Yeah, you're doing it right. You're not cutting any
Yeah.
corners. We talked a lot about wheel size going into as a design input and a few other things, but as you guys set off to spec the vision for this bike and who you're going to sell it to, what kind of bike were you trying to make?
Yeah, it's funny, around the launch of it, or leading into the launch, when we're coming up with the marketing materials and a bit of the story. Is I asked myself that a lot, and I kind of kept coming to the sense that it seemed really generic in a way, because we're trying to say like this is the bike for to kind of check off all the types of riding you want to do. Um,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's kind of where we're still coming in at, because we have a geometry, and the level of integration on the bike, that it's a fast it's a bike that literally could win Unbound. It could be raced at the front, the pointy end of any of the biggest gravel races. Um,
Yeah.
and then
And I know, and just to pin on that, I know you have athletes that are expecting that bike
Yeah,
from you.
yeah, and that was it. I mean,
You know,
we as a performance brand, like that's a big part of our DNA, and we do have the athletes. We have Alexi Vermeulen, Whitney Allison, both athletes that are at the front of these fastest gravel events. So we wanted to deliver the tools they needed to be competitive. But then we added in features like the fork mounts, some different eyelets, that if you want to use it as a weekend, bike packing getaway, like those are kind of when we talk about the versatility, like those are the add-on features that don't diminish the performance in any way. It's not going to keep you from winning any race, but for 99% of us that use one bike, or one gravel bike to kind of do everything, like it just allows you to do more with
yeah,
it, not be
yeah,
limited in what you
yeah.
want to do. So
I hear you. It's interesting, and I appreciate your comments on it because I think you guys did deliver a bike that works across that entire spectrum. I struggle to think if you were working with Alexi and you said, Alexi, we want to build you your dream bike. Possibly there's eyelets that come off. Possibly there's a few things on the margins that make it a little lighter weight, but at the end of the day, that's such a rarefied space in the gravel
Yeah,
world. Someone who just can afford to have a kind of a throwaway race bike that's as light everywhere as it possibly can
yeah,
be. That's just simply not practical for the average person who's going to buy a bike.
yeah, exactly. And then on the the other end of it, it was like you know we didn't want to compromise. We didn't want to add additional weight in terms of like extreme aero shaping that you see on some gravel bikes, compromise ride quality. So we really tried to get get the MOG to achieve. Again, everyone has their own ideas of what the priorities are, but
Yeah.
for us internally and working with our athletes, we really did look at what the priorities were, and that's the MOG is a result of that.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's such a great time to buy a gravel bike. Whenever I get asked by people these days, I'm like, fortunately, now it's harder to go
Oh, for
wrong. When I
sure.
first started the podcast, I think one of the whole reasons I started this podcast is I did get it wrong in my first gravel bike purchase. And you were always forced to make decisions around tire width
Yep.
and different things that just are non issues today, which is wonderful.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think I remember, and you referenced it, to building a custom bike, because gravel bikes weren't on the market yet for my first Crusher and the Tusher event I did. And to think back, like I knew what I wanted. Well, I wasn't even thinking big enough because I would have never imagined, the equipment that we have today. But I knew I wanted more at that time. And that was only 11 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. But there were such limitations on what you could get. You were dealing with cyclocross tires, or if you went with something bigger, it wasn't tubeless, and it was just and then if you did get the actual size of tire you wanted, you were limited on the frames it would work on. So you're just compromising, pretty much everywhere. And so today, like new riders getting into the market, like it's amazing because there is so much good equipment out there that truly is like purpose built for gravel.
Yeah. Yeah. And that whole spectrum, you put a pair of 32C tires on an Enve MOG, you can go and do your group
Totally.
rides and be entirely
Yeah,
proficient. And then you can go up to 50s and you can put the bike packing bags on
exactly. Yeah.
and everything in between. Nice. As listeners are looking to learn more about the bike, what's the best place to go, and what's the shop network? How can people find where they might be able to throw a leg over one and take a look at it more in more detail?
Yeah, so on our website, enve.com, we have the MOG there. So all the information, if you want to read about it, some of the design elements, the features of the bike, it's all there. Or if you want to just look at some cool photos of people riding MOGs, but we also have a dealer locator right on the website, so you can go through. You can select Enve bikes, and it'll pull up retailers near you. And honestly, pretty much all Enve ride centers, which are kind of our premium shops across the country. I think we have about 60 of those. Everyone has MOGs in stock. So yeah.
Awesome. And you've also doing a bunch of events this year. I know I saw you guys at Sea Otter, and sounds like you'll be out at Unbound and a few other
Yeah,
events,
we'll
right?
be at Unbound. We'll be at Crusher. If anyone's interested in coming to Envy and taking part in the Rodeo, our own event, there are still some entries left for that as well. So
Awesome. And is that in June again
yeah,
this year?
June 24 and 25.
Awesome. And you additionally held one in Girona.
Oh
Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah. Last October we did the Rodeo. So
How'd
it
that
was
go?
it was great. anyone that's have you ridden in Girona before?
Yeah, it's so funny, Neil. I missed it by
Oh
one
no.
week. I had a pre-planned trip, and I was like, I caught wind on social media that you were doing the event, and I was like, I will lose my mind if the event I've already booked a ticket for coincides with the rodeo. I would love that, but unfortunately, I was like a week displaced.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, yeah, I did a week of riding in Girona last
Yeah. So
November.
you know how special it is. I mean,
It's
whether you're
great.
riding on the
Yeah,
road or gravel or mountain biking or just, I mean, the town, you can't beat it. It's really like it's a
yeah,
dream. I told my wife I might not come home, but yeah,
so good,
no.
so
So
good.
yeah, that was a great event. We're doing that again this year. So late October.
Awesome. And you were teamed up with the service course. Is that one of your premier shops
Yep,
over there?
exactly. So they actually
Yeah.
have MOGs as part of their rental fleet. So someone's going there for vacations. It's a hotbed for, um, cycling tourists coming in. So yeah, you can rent a MOG and go check it out.
Cool. And just so it's not missed, at the Grodio event in Utah, Envy does an open house. They bring a bunch of frame builders in. It's just a totally magical weekend of great eye candy, great riding, great people, and a whole lot of fun. Did you try to achieve a similar kind of custom builder vibe in
Yeah.
Girona?
We tried to take that same model. Here in Ogden, we typically have about 2 dozen custom frame builders. In Girona, I think there were 12, mostly European focused. Although we did have Argonaut and Mosaic out there as well.
Yeah.
Because I mean, really, for a lot of us in the industry, like we just do these things as an excuse so we can go ride our bike in super cool places. And so, yeah, we had we had some great builders out there. Good food, killer riding, good time.
Yeah. Awesome. I got to see a few of the leftover custom bikes in the service course shop while I was there. So, yeah, you guys do it right over there.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I appreciate all the time, Neil. I appreciate getting back up to speed on the MOG. I love how it turned out. And while I was impatient, you guys delivered.
Well, thanks, Craig, and you know my number if you want to jump on one and take some time on it.
Of course, man. I hope to see
Okay,
you
thank
soon.
you.
That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Gravel Ride Podcast. Big thanks to my friend Neil Shirley for joining the show and telling us all about that Enve MOG gravel bike. I'll put a link in the show note to Envy's website to learn more about this bike, and be sure to be on the lookout for it underneath Whitney Allison and Alexi Vermillion in many of the biggest gravel races around the world this year. If you're interested in connecting with me, I encourage you to join the ridership. That's www.theridership.com. That's a free global cycling community to connect with other gravel athletes all around the world and exchange our love of the sport. If you're able to support the show, ratings and reviews are hugely appreciated. So go ahead and take a moment and leave us one of those 5-star reviews. It really helps with our discoverability. If you're able to support the show, I encourage you to visit buymeacoffee.com/thegravelride. Your financial support of what we do really helps make the show work. It's a labor of love, and I appreciate all the support everyone's provided to me. Until next time, here's to finding some dirt under your wheels.